Thomas Hobbes Leviathan is a system of government tasked with peace and defense. Welcome back. This is The Average, and here's my attempt at summarizing Thomas Hobbes Leviathan, which was written in 1651. Overall, I do value some points, but I do not agree with Hobbes on his ideal government, which I'm willing to bet is pro-monarchy, aristocracy, or even theocracy. I tried to really understand his chapter on the Christian Commonwealth, but it went over my head. So let's start with some quotes. The final cause and or design of men who naturally love liberty and dominion over others in the introduction of that restraint upon themselves in which we see them live in commonwealths is the foresight of their own preservation and of a more contented life thereby. That is to say, of getting themselves out of that miserable condition of war which is necessarily consequent, as has been shown, to the natural passions of men when there is no visible power to keep them in awe and tie them by fear of punishment to the performance of their covenants. So according to Hobbes, this is why governments will always form. It's simply for safety. The author claims wild men are naturally inclined for war unless they are threatened by a system of punishment. If wild men want to preserve themselves, they must join a commonwealth. So Hobbes defines natural men as disinclined towards peace for a few reasons. Men compete for honor and dignity, which drive envy, hatred, and sometimes war. Men's joys consist of comparing himself to others. Men value only eminence. Men assume they are wiser and abler to govern the public better than the rest. Men lie. Men can't be content with peace. And finally, men's agreement for peace is only artificial and needs real punishment or fear to be kept in place. Let's read a quote. The only way to erect such a common power as may be able to defend them from the invasion of foreigners and the injuries of one another, and thereby to secure them such a sort as that by their own industry and by the fruits of the earth they may nourish themselves and live contentedly, is to confer all their power and strength upon one man or upon one assembly of men, that may reduce all their wills by plurality of voices unto one will, which is as much to say as to appoint one man or assembly of men to bear their person, and every one to their own acknowledge himself to be the author of whatsoever he that so beareth their person shall act, or cause to be acted, in those things which concern the common peace and safety, and therein to submit their wills every one to his will, and their judgment to his judgment. So Hobbes supports a system where one person or group of people ought to be in charge, which we know as either aristocracy, monarchy, authoritarian dictator, oligarchy, theocracy, etc. He also touches on the temptation to be governed by this type of system because it provides a rapid satisfaction for safety and security. Here's another quote. This is more than consent or concord. It is a real unity of them all in one and the same person, made by covenant of every man with every man in such a manner as if every man should say to every man, I authorize and give up my right of governing myself to this man, or to this assembly of men, on this condition, that thou give up thy right to him, and authorize all his actions in like manner. This done, the multitude so united in one person is called a commonwealth, in Latin civitas. This is the generation of that great Leviathan, or rather, to speak more reverently, of that mortal God, to which we owe, under the immortal God, our peace and defense. For by this authority given him by every particular man in the commonwealth, he hath the use of so much power and strength conferred on him, that, by terror thereof, he is enabled to form all the wills of them all to peace at home and mutual aid against their enemies abroad. It's fascinating rhetoric. Next, let's review Tommy's little rules for a social contract to the best of my reading ability. 1. Whether a member likes it or not, a person is bound to that power structure, its representatives, and their rules. One cannot transfer themselves to another power structure without Thomas considering it injustice. Or if there is a revolt and an attempt to depose the monarch, Tommy considers that an injustice, and any punishment is to be expected. Also, to depose a power structure in the name of God is a pretense without the supreme representative of God giving approval. 2. Just as the people are bound, sworn to the power structure, so is the governing body. To think otherwise risks forfeiture of the safety created by the power structure. If everyone honestly agrees to the social contract and its content, then corruption is avoidable. 3. Once a man is in the given power structure, it is disadvantageous to leave or disagree, otherwise one risks being thrown out. 4. The subjects cannot claim or accuse injustice by their sovereigns, and sovereigns cannot claim injustice by their subjects because they are bound to the same power structure, which I disagree with since there are abuses of power. 5. Death penalty is too extreme of a punishment and should be avoided. 6. The individual or ruling group decides what opinions, doctrines are appropriate, which is censorship, which is bad. Also, who can speak to the people as well as how they can speak, because the higher-ups want to control the influence of the people. Number 7. The goods anyone may enjoy are also regulated. The higher-ups decide what items are available to you. They also decide on propriety. They decide the civil laws, what's good, what's evil, lawful, and unlawful. 8. The higher-ups have the right to judicature, which that is hearing and deciding all controversies concerning civil or natural law. 9. They decide when it's appropriate time for war and arrange funding. 10. They choose their counselors, ministers, magistrates, and officers. 11. They decide rewards and punishments. And 12. There ought to be a system of civil laws to combat the natural state of man, which claims men don't value other men. So there is a possible oxymoron within the book. Initially, Hobbes says man will go from a state of war to peace, but then writes, because in small numbers, small additions on the one side or the other make the advantage of strength so great as is sufficient to carry the victory, and therefore gives encouragement to an invasion. So the drive for safety may cause small groups to conglomerate into a great nation, but may also encourage a desire to invade others. So I think the author concludes a singular, lone person can increase safety by joining a society, but this does not completely eliminate the possibility of war. Now, continuing on with this possible oxymoron, Thomas wrote, and in all places where men have lived by small families, to rob and spoil one another has been a trade, and so far from being reputed against the law of nature that the greater spoils they gained, the greater was their honor. And men observed no other laws therein but the laws of honor, that is, to abstain from cruelty, leaving to men their lives and instruments of husbandry. And as small families did then, so now do cities and kingdoms, which are but greater families for their own security, enlarge their domains upon all pretenses of danger and fear of invasion or assistance that may be given to invaders. Endeavor as much as they can to subdue or weaken their neighbors by open force and secret arts, for want of other caution justly, and are remembered for it in the ages after with honor. So I love his definition of honor, and it's simply written, but so powerful. Honor means to reduce your cruelty and leave others to their husbandry, which is farming. However, Thomas briefly speaks that wild men in small groups or nations naturally rob and hurt others for honor. One big and very important concept in this last quote is the pretenses of danger, fear of invasion, or assistance to invaders. These are a few of the driving forces for aggressive behavior towards other peoples and nations. I really love how Hobbes identifies and defines fear tactics used by manipulative people to get what they want, invent policies, or incite violence. And it's very important to recognize and internalize this concept. I just love that Hobbes wrote so succinctly about it in the 1600s. That'll be the end of part 1. Thank you for your time and patience. I'm D Average.